Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, ADHD. I am your psychologist and behavior specialist Geraldine Garwood. Today I want to discuss ADHD with parents and teachers so that they can have a better understanding on the diagnosis and how parents can help their children to cope with this diagnosis. We see an image here of the brain, and there are some key words on the image: hyperactivity, inattention, diagnosis, treatment, disorder, severity, childhood. And those keywords are important because ADHD is generally diagnosed from childhood. So, what is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder? This is a neurodevelopmental disorder defined by impairing levels of inattention, disorganization, and or hyperactivity, impulsivity. Inattention and disorganization involve inability to stay on task. So the child is not able to stay on task, appearing not to listen, and losing things. The child often loses things, and when they are in class or at home and they are given an instruction, they appear or they look like they are not listening. They are actually looking in space. These things occur at levels that are inconsistent with age or developmental milestone. And I want to say to parents and educators that it is important to understand the developmental milestone of our children and what are the expected behaviors that they should be displaying at each developmental milestone so that we do not confuse a diagnosis of ADHD with normal development. So look out for my video that will speak to developmental milestone in children. Hyperactivity, impulsivity bring about overactivity, fidgeting, inability to remain seated, interfering in others' activity, and failure to wait. In childhood, ADHD frequently overlaps with disorders that are often considered to be externalizing disorders, such as oppositional defiant disorder and conduct disorder. So, oppositional defiant disorder is a disorder where students or children are not readily conforming to rule governed behaviors. And so they oppose parents, they oppose teachers, they oppose any instructions that are given from both parents and teachers. And so it is important also that we understand these two disorders, which I will look at in a follow-up video as well, so that we do not mix up the diagnosis of ADHD, so that we are able to differentiate between both, even though ADHD can overlap with these two disorders. So here we have an image of a boy, and this boy has all kind of things going on. All kind of things. He has a car, pencil, a plane, a piece of paper, a phone, a ball in his hands, and he's just all over the place. Children with ADHD, sometimes they are just all over the place, doing all kinds of things at the same time. So it is important for us to look at the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM-5, the criteria that is given in the DSM-5 on how we come to a diagnosis of ADHD. First, there are two parts to this diagnosis, and the first part is inattention. The child should display 6 or more of the following symptoms, and it must continue for at least 6 months to a degree that is inconsistent with his or her developmental level, and it negatively impacts directly on social and academic occupational activities. So for inattention, the child often fails to give close attention to details or makes careless mistakes in schoolwork or during other activities. Example, overlooks or misses details. Work is inaccurate. The child often has difficulty sustaining attention in task or play activity. Example, has difficulty remaining focused during class, talks, or extensive reading. The child often does not seem to listen when spoken to directly. Example, their mind seems elsewhere, even in the absence of any obvious distraction. The child often does not follow through on instructions and fails to finish schoolwork and chores. Example, starts task but quickly loses focus and is easily preoccupied. The child often has difficulty organizing tasks and activities. Example, difficulty keeping materials and belongings in order, messy, disorganized work, has poor time management, fails to meet deadlines. The child often loses things necessary for tasks or activities. Example, school materials, pencils, books. The child often avoids, dislikes, or is unwilling to engage in tasks that require continued mental effort. Example, schoolwork or homework. For older adolescents, preparing reports, completing forms, reviewing lengthy papers, and the child is often forgetful in daily activities. So these are the criteria that the child should meet for inattention. So we go to part 2 of the diagnosis, which is hyperactivity and impulsivity. 6 or more of the following symptoms have continued for at least 6 months to a degree that is inconsistent with developmental level and that negatively impacts directly on social and academic occupational activities. So, the child often fidgets with or taps hands or feet or squirms in seat. The child often leaves seat in situations when remaining seated is expected. Example, leaves his or her place in the classroom or in other situations that require remaining in place. The child often runs about or climbs in situations where it is inappropriate. The child often unable to play or engage in timeout activities quietly. The child is often on the go, acting as if driven by a motor. Example, is unable to be or uncomfortable being still for extended time. The child often talks excessively. The child often blurts out an answer before a question has been completed. Example, completes people's sentences, cannot wait for turn in conversation. The child often has difficulty waiting his or her turn. Example, while waiting in line. The child often interrupts or intrudes on others. Example, butts into conversations, games, or activities. May start using other people's things without asking or receiving permission. Now, I want to provide some tips for parents so as to help to support their child who may have a diagnosis of ADHD. The first thing parents ought to do is accept that their child's brain function differently from other children. Children with ADHD have the ability to learn what is right from wrong. However, their disorder does make them more susceptible to impulsive behavior. Next tip for parents, define rules for the child with flexibility. Inflexible rules leads to aggression. Next tip, manage the child's aggression with timeout periods and explain the reason for the timeout. Create a routine structure for the child and stick to it daily. And one may ask the question about flexibility if they need to create a structured routine for the child. But flexibility can be a part of a structured routine for the child. What that means is that you are going to be flexible but consistent. Next rule, break down tasks into manageable, teachable units. So, whatever activities you're giving the child, break it down into portions, manageable, teachable units. Critical, limit any form of distraction. So, as parents, you need to understand or know what distractions are for your child and you limit that. Try to remove those distractions out of the environs that the child may be required to perform certain tasks. Engage a child in frequent exercise. So, a part of the child's routine is exercise. And I would recommend that the child exercise early in the morning. Burn up some of the energy as they begin the day. This is a very important one. Give the child less sweets. So allow the child to drink more water than juice. Minimize the child having a lot of sweets. Control the child's sleeping pattern. So you need to decide what time the child goes to bed at night, and that should be consistent every night. There may be flexibility if the family goes out, if there is something that needs to get done that is important, but you need to explain that to the child. When you control the child's sleeping pattern, it is easier for them to fall asleep. Encourage your child. Never let your child see your frustration levels. And that is very important because a number of parents may not have the required training to help their own child deal with a diagnosis of ADHD. And so, even during the pandemic, some parents may be at home with the child or a caregiver, and they may be feeling frustrated because they are not able to support the child or manage the child's hyperactivity. But never let the child see that you are frustrated with him or her. Provide encouragement, provide support. Let them know that you are there for them. You love and care for them, and you are their biggest supporter. Critical for your parents, get individual counseling for yourself. Why? It is important that you have coping strategies to help you to support your child with ADHD. This is not an easy diagnosis to deal with. And so it is important that you yourself go and see a counselor so that you can talk through what exactly you're feeling, and you can be provided with coping skills so that you can support your child to the fullest. And parents, take break periods. You need to breathe. So sometimes you need to take break periods. So if you can get someone to stay with the child and you take a break, that would be helpful. If that is not, if you are not able to do that, then you can take your break periods from the child. Take a breather and get back to what you are doing. I do hope that parents and educators now have a better understanding of what a diagnosis of ADHD looks like, and that you will understand if your child is misdiagnosed. Because what is happening now is that because many educators and parents do not understand what is involved in the typical developmental milestone, so what behaviors a child ought to be displaying in early childhood, middle to late childhood, and adolescence, oftentimes children are misdiagnosed with ADHD. So look out for my video to come on the developmental milestones that children ought to go through. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and click the notification bell.